Good evening, everyone. I welcome all of you to BSL's 50th webinar for the year 2025 and 2026, Understanding Gender Equality in the Legal Profession and Practice, organized by the Bar Association's Gender Equality Subcommittee, together with the Webinars and Legal Symposiums Committee. I am Poojani Galapathy, a member of the Gender Equality Committee, and I would like to start by expressing my heartfelt gratitude to the Bar Association of Sri Lanka and the chairperson of the Gender Equality Committee, Ms. Tushani Machado, for making this happen. Before we start, I would like to give some technical details to note during the session. First, we are providing simultaneous interpretation facilities in Sinhala and in Tamil. So for those interested, please click the More button in the taskbar and then click on the globe icon which says interpretation. Then you can access the language of your choice. And you may also mute the original video when the interpretation facility is being used. And also please note that besides the discussion part of the session, you may also send your questions in through the chat. Now I'll give you a few seconds to sort out the interpretation and join in. Please ask any questions with regards to interpretation if you have now. Okay, I hope everyone is ready to start. Before we start, I would like to say that we are about to dwell into a very heavily contested topic. So I kindly request all of you to have an open mind and engage in a fruitful discussion with our panelists. Let me now introduce our esteemed panel. Our first panelist is Ms. Shamala Gomez. Ms. Gomez is a human rights lawyer and activist. She is the founder and executive director of the Center for Equality and Justice, CEJ, an organization working on issues of post-war and women. Ms. Gomez is a former lecturer at the Faculty of Law at the University of Colombo. She was a gender advisor to the UN Office of the Resident Coordinator Colombo for several years, where she conducted sessions on anti-sexual harassment policies for private sector companies. Ms. Gomez is also a current member of the Anti-Harassment Committee established by the National Olympics Committee in Sri Lanka. She has published widely on violence against women, women's access to justice, masculinities, migrant worker rights, women's land rights, reproductive rights, and on women, peace and security. A Fulbright scholar, she has an LLB from the University of Colombo and a master's in law from Georgetown University, Washington, D.C. Moving on to our second panelist, Ms. Mokshini Jayamanna. She's an attorney at law, and she has been engaged in the active practice in areas of family law, matters involving the Hague Convention on civil aspects of international child abduction, damages, money recovery, land disputes, and civil appeals for 19 years. She is also an educator, and she brings this knowledge and experience to her work as a litigator, handling every matrimonial dispute with a keen sensitivity and empathy towards the minors caught in the crossfire. She is an accredited mediator of the Singapore International Mediation Institute. Her expertise and experience have led her to become an advocate of mediation as an efficient form of alternate dispute resolution, as the Assistant Secretary Member of the Executive Committee to the Bar Association, and as the Chairperson of Women Lawyers. I would like to introduce our final panelist, Ms. Naushala Rajpaksha. She is an attorney at law with more than 10 years of experience in gender-responsive governance, policy reform, and rights-based advocacy in Sri Lanka. Her expertise spans from gender-responsive planning legal and policy analysis, and institutional capacity building. Working with ministries, parliaments, UN agencies, and civil societies to embed gender equality and social inclusion across health, agriculture, disaster risk, and social protection. Ms. Rajapaksa is a researcher as well as a trainer, leading programs that empower women, youth, and marginalized groups, with a view to bridging policy and practice, ensuring strategies are both rights-based and responsive to community realities. She is currently engaged as the National Gender Specialist, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. So I warmly welcome our panel. And finally, we'd like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Ms. Hasini Rupasinghe. Hasini is an attorney at law and an advocate for human rights and gender equality. She's also a member of the Gender Equality Committee of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. All right, so we will now start a very interesting and important discussion. And to start, I would now like to hand over to Ms. Hasini Rupasinghe. Thank you.
Thank you, Poojani. Before I go to my questions, let me also thank the three panelists who have joined today amidst their busy schedules and other commitments to be here and speak to our participants and viewers. So as lawyers, as law students and apprentices, we are always asked to be curious and inquisitive about society, about laws, customs, systems, structures, and the way they operate. We are trained to ask the right questions in search of the truth and towards the ends of justice. As lawyers, we take a lot of pride in being part of a noble profession and a profession of the highest standard. And we talk a lot about integrity and respect. But something that we don't often talk about or question or pay attention to is the topic of today's webinar, gender equality in the legal profession and practice, which I would say is integral to any workplace, any society, as much as it is both important and relevant to the legal profession and practice. So today's discussion with our three esteemed panelists and everyone who has joined who wishes to participate in this discussion is going to be very basic, but nonetheless fundamental to understand that gender equality is essential to development and the progression of any profession. And sadly, as much as the rest of the world, we are still far from achieving gender equality in terms of rights, access, opportunities, and treatment. So the speakers for today will draw from everyday experiences and try to voice some of the ground realities which are unspoken, and also to recommend some of the ways that we can move forward as legal professionals and members of the bar to strive a more equal and equitable profession and practice. So, as Poojani said, it may be a hard pill to swallow for some. It may also be very reflective and relatable, hopefully to many. So I invite you all, like Poojani said, to have an open mind, and please do maximize the use of the Q&A and forward your questions as we go on in this session, as we have allocated a time of about 15 to 20 minutes towards the end to answer any of your questions. So without further ado, let me move to our first panelist, Ms. Shyamala Gomez. With your experience in academia and research, and with your experiences in the spaces and platforms that you have been, what do you see as gender equality? I would say gender equality is perceived by different people in different ways, and sometimes seen as something that we should not be the topic of open discussion. So what is the meaning of gender equality? How does it matter? How does to the legal profession, and how does anything become a matter of gender equality or inequality? And what are some of the overall challenges faced by women in the legal profession that we need to talk about and acknowledge? And is it important to do that?
Thank you, Hasini. And thank you to the Gender Equality Committee of the Bar Association for inviting me to this panel. I think Hasini and Poojani laid down the foundation for this discussion, and I was struck by the fact that you did mention, Hasini, that gender equality. I think it is Poojani who said contested. And I like that term because, like Hasini and Poojani say, this is gender equality is something that is in our everyday lives, but sadly not in everyone's. So I think this is what we are kind of looking at here, and this is what we'd like to challenge and ask you who are listening in to also challenge in your everyday lives. In terms of the question you asked, Hasini, okay, so I've kind of broken up my presentation into three. That is that, okay, I will briefly talk about what gender equality is, because there may be those that may not understand that. It's pretty simple, actually. It's pretty simple. Then the overall challenges that women face in the legal profession, and what can be done to improve the situation. Very broadly, very in a nutshell. Right? So, okay, what is gender equality? And here, all we are talking about is that men, women, and people of all genders have the same rights, the same opportunities, and access to in every sphere of life. Right? In a nutshell, that's what it is. And here you can see that we include all genders. It's not only men and women, and we need to make sure that we also include other genders. There are other genders, and we need to include those genders also into our conversation here. That is what we are talking about in gender equality. And in terms of examples, I'll give you a couple of examples. Say, for example, in the sphere of education, we are talking about the same rights and opportunities to engage in learning, in training opportunities. Similarly, in employment, you would ask that rights and opportunities to apply for the same job, to get the same wages, to get and access promotions. These are all what we are talking about, right? But some of you who are women here might say, okay, but we don't have that. We don't have the same access. We don't have the same rights as men, as my colleague, my male colleague. And we need to know why that is, right? So we are talking about not just a very simple definition of equality. We are talking about how do you make sure that you level the playing field for both men and women and other genders. So in other words, everyone has to be on the same level in order to access these opportunities and rights. Right? I mean, let me, I mean, without being theoretical, I think in the law, we learn about formal equality, about substantive equality. Formal equality is, okay, everyone is the same, so you have the right to go and access something. Substantive equality is, we know that that is not true. We know that women are unable to, and we will go into that a little bit later, women are unable to access those rights because they don't have those same opportunities. What do we mean by that? Giving them that push-up or that certain support measures makes sure that women also are able to access those same opportunities. That is called substantive equality, right? So looking at gender, okay, one aspect of it would be fairness. In other words, making sure that you provide extra benefits or support to women because we believe that women have been historically disadvantaged. And that is why you try to level that playing field, right? If not, you will not get gender equality. You will not achieve gender equality, right? In employment, let me take one example. If you're looking at employment, making sure that women are able to accommodate their dual responsibilities, both as looking after the household, certain care responsibilities, but also being able to have a professional life. You would maybe bring in things like flexi hours or flexible hours or remote working or part-time work. These are ways in which you're leveling that playing field, in other words, right? Trying to make sure that women also have that opportunity to go up, break through the glass ceiling and go up in their professional career as well, right? Similarly, some of you might know that in politics, you have quotas for women in certain countries. In Sri Lanka too, we have a 25% quota for women in local government. Why is that? Because you're trying to make sure that women also get that same opportunity to contest in politics at the local government level. right? That is what we mean by substantive equality. You're making sure that you're leveling that playing field, right? So this is, okay, so when you look at, so that's generally, if you look at gender equality in the legal profession, there are certain factors that are required in order to ensure gender equality. One would be that women and men have equal opportunities to enter into, to advance, and lead in the practice of the law, and the ability to enter the judiciary, for example. That would be one, right? So equal opportunities, in other words, to be able to enter into these different aspects of the legal profession. Similarly, you need to make sure that the courts, which is one of one's workplace, one type of workplace, but chambers, lawyers' chambers, for example, are free from bias and discrimination and harassment. We go into a little bit of these as well. And similarly, you would also need to ensure that women have equal representation in decision making. So how do you do that? To be able to seek promotions and high-level positions as attorneys, as judges, and in the public and private sector in order to assume these decision-making roles. So these are the factors you need to have for a woman lawyer in the legal profession to be able to achieve gender equality. So in other words, you're leveling the playing field by making sure that these factors come in to one's into the profession, right? Briefly, I just want to bring in some of the challenges faced by women lawyers, and I think some of the other panelists are way more able to do this. But I have been, well, I've done the research, and I know that, I'm aware of the legal profession and the different challenges that they face, both in the courts, in the chambers, in the workspace, in the corporate sector, for example, in the public sector. And these challenges are the ones that I have come across, and I just want to put it to you. One of the challenges that women lawyers face would be how to have this work-life balance, right? Very tough, very tough, right? How do you do that? For women, it's harder, right? Women lawyers report difficulties in balancing their professional commitments along with their family and caregiving roles. And this is obvious. I mean, many of you who know what it is like to juggle, your work as well as your family life, right? And as a result, what happens is women lawyers are unable to break through that glass ceiling to reach the higher positions due to the lack of support by the legal profession for their care responsibilities, right? I'm sure you know many examples. I won't go into it, right? And what happens there is that, and I have had many students as well in the law faculty who, after they leave, they're very good students, but they leave the faculty. And when I meet them like 5 years later, and I ask them what they're doing, they're saying, we left practice after marriage, after my child, because I can't balance both. So you sacrifice, in other words, it's one or the other. You sacrifice one or the other to make sure that, and you don't, because you feel maybe guilty, right? You might feel guilty as well, but you also want to do your best for one of these things. It's difficult, right? It's difficult to balance the two. So you end up leaving the legal, your job, right? Or your practice, because you can't manage both, right? The other something I want to bring up also is the long hours of work. And I think, again, I'm looking at it from the outside. I'm not an attorney at law, but I know for a fact, and I have met many young people, older lawyers as well, women lawyers, who have talked about the long hours of work. I have gone to chambers where I have found lawyers, both men and women, and I think here we're talking about long work hours for both men and women, right? And the fact that hours of work in the chambers are not regulated, right? And this is something I'm putting to you, whether we should be regulating this. Similarly, you would not have transport facilities being provided for women lawyers at night when they do work in the chambers, unless there's a very extraordinary circumstance. I'm not aware of it, unless there are lawyers that provide this. But these are critical, because if you don't provide now this is what we're talking about, substantive equality, in other words. You're trying to make sure that women stay in the legal profession by providing them that support to be able to continue their work, right? Similarly, I think again, I'd like to bring this up. I think it's important that we don't deny it, but there is sexual harassment taking place by seniors, by colleagues, and in the legal profession, both in the courts, in the chambers, and these have been documented. And to also important to realize that, for example, the International Labour Organization defines the workplace very broadly. They talk about, it could be, world of work means many things. It could be going to work with your senior in a car to Hulstorf, right? Where you could be sexually harassed by your senior, for example, right? It could be going home when he's giving you a ride back home, right? So this is all the workplace, and it amounts to sexual harassment, which has penal consequences because we have a law defined. We have a law in place, right? It's also about dealing with burnout, stress due to work and family commitments, and unable to have that work balance, as I mentioned. Something else which is extremely important, has come up time and time again, is the fact that women lawyers feel that they need to work doubly hard to be accepted as equals and to prove themselves as much as men. So in other words, you're not even given the same tasks as male lawyers. You might be given something more menial, something not as complicated or not as important, because there is this bias among people, that a certain stereotyping or bias that takes place, and I think now shall we talk about this, what we call unconscious bias, which is where without even realizing we have certain biases, right, based on our own experiences. So the experience is, okay, the male lawyer will do a better job, in other words. That's an inherent bias. It's not proved by research. It's not proved by research, right? So that is an unconscious bias. This happens as well, right? And it happens, I think, quite often, where women lawyers feel less valued in their workplace, both in their practice as well as in the chambers, right? Then I'm going to another factor, and this actually, I really want to say this because recently, when I knew that I was going to be on this panel, I was having a chat with a young woman lawyer who recently had a baby. The baby turns 1 in a couple of months. And she told me something which really struck at my gut, right? And I'm sure it will strike many of you on this panel as well and others listening. She told me about the fact that when she went back to work, back to her chambers to continue her work as a lawyer, and she went to Hulstorf, she had to pump her breasts. There was no place to pump her breast for her breast milk, for her milk, because she had left her baby at home and she came to work, right? And she had to sit in the car and pump her milk, right? And she told me, I cried while I was doing that, right? That's one. And then she said, where do I keep the milk after pumping it? She said she had to leave the milk in the fridge in the canteen in Hulstorf, right? Second example, right? She also talked about the fact that there is no designated seating in the courts for pregnant lawyers, right? So you have to squeeze in wherever you can and basically manage, right? These are all factors that need to be, I would think, need to be addressed. So I think, stop them almost on time. I'm just going to briefly mention, and maybe we can go into it in the discussion, Hasini, what can be done, right? And I'm very broadly talking about it here. I'm talking about a policy, a gender equality policy for the bar, one that is implemented and not just sits on a shelf. It needs to be implemented. So a gender equality policy, one that is rolled out, a sexual harassment, anti-sexual harassment policy for the BASL, with the complaints mechanism. I think Naushala is going to talk about this. And most importantly, law school education needs to make sure that issues of gender are covered in law school education. It has to be given that place within the curricula that is rolled out, right? Whether it be law college, whether it be the law faculty, wherever it is, it doesn't matter. but there needs to be some kind of integration or mainstreaming of gender issues into the different courses, and you can do it, right? It should not be left to individual lawyers or lecturers to be doing it by them because they are interested in it, which is what used to happen a while back when I was at the faculty, right? Because of my interest, I brought it in, right, into my courses, right, whatever way I could. If I'm learning about, if you're learning about public interest litigation, you would ask the students, then go do an assignment on gender equality, where it talks about a woman's issue, right? That's the way you do it. So basically making sure that with the international humanitarian law, human rights, anything, you can bring in that gender perspective into all of it. And I think that is a critical need. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gomez. I think that was a very broad overall view, which gave a lot of points and food for thought for us to continue this discussion. And thank you so much for bringing in some of the very important observations that you have made by yourself and through friends in the profession. I think we will take what you said and what you opened up for discussion throughout today's proceedings. And we will perhaps circle back to you when we discuss on recommendations and what can be some of the actionable things that we can take forward as the Gender Equality Committee and the bar as a whole. So thanks again, Ms. Gomez. I will now move to Ms. Mokshini Jayamana. So Ms. Jayamana, you have had a very active practice in this profession for almost 20 years now. And you have been very much involved in advancing the profession in various capacities. In your experience, what are some of the challenges and impediments that you have seen women lawyers face in navigating their careers? Is it a common global phenomenon? How is it dealt with in other jurisdictions? And where are we lacking in ensuring that we are also moving in that direction? Over to you.
Okay, thanks, Hasini. That's a loaded question. I will try to do justice in my response to all the aspects you have mentioned there in the limited time that I have. But yes, in my 19 plus years of practice, I can tell you without batting an eyelid that the reason I have had the opportunity to enjoy the benefits of what comes with committing and working hard in this field is because I come, and I'm not ashamed to say this, I come from a position of privilege, right? I was born to a family that supported me, and I am from the English-speaking subculture in Sri Lanka, in Colombo, where equality of genders is taken as a given. It is not an exception. My family supported me. I have relatives who are lawyers. I was able to join the chamber of my uncle, who was the president of the Bar Association and a president's council. So what I'm trying to get at is that I count it a privilege to be able to sit in this panel with you and answer these questions on the issues faced by women in the practice. But I am not ignorant of the fact that the reason I even have this opportunity to speak is because I have been blessed with certain privileges, and I'm not ashamed to say that, right? Whereas a vast majority of women in this profession do not have that opportunity, right? Now, why is that? And you asked whether this was a phenomenon that is unique to Sri Lanka. No, by all means, no. It is, in fact, something that is faced by even female litigators in the United Kingdom, in America, in South Africa, and in India, and in every single country, right? To a lesser or more, larger extent. There are various factors that influence this, but essentially women have faced varying degrees of opposition in the practice of law. Okay, so I will get to your question about what I find to be some of the obstacles and major challenges. But I'm just going to track back a little bit and maybe put this in context a little bit, Hasini, if you would permit me. Right now, we are all, and I trust that even the participants in this webinar come from a position from the premise that all human beings are created equal. Okay, we have recognized that even in our constitution, right? We have our fundamental rights, and those are rights that are the inherent privileges of every single human being in this country, right? And also, it's not just about the privilege, the right to life, etc., but also the right to be gainfully employed, to choose a profession, a vocation of your choice, right? All of these things are recognized by our constitution. So I believe that as lawyers, I assume that the majority of participants are lawyers, and we have sworn an oath to uphold our constitution. And I believe that every single member of the profession believes that we as lawyers who advocate for these rights are entitled to enjoy these rights even as much as we advocate for these rights. So that an extension of that is that whether you are a male or a female, you should be able to enjoy the same benefits that anyone would be able to enjoy if you are a member of this profession and have been given the opportunity to practice your craft without any obstacle or restriction. Now, why then are we even having this conversation? The fact that we are having this conversation is because that is not the case. The facts prove the contrary, right? So that means that is actually not happening. Shyamala was talking about substantive equality. In theory, it's there, but substantively, it's not there. Hasini, we don't really understand, we don't even realize that it was only in 1933 that women even were allowed to study law and join the profession. In 1933. Okay, in the 20th century. That was with the Ordinance Sex Disqualification Removal Legal Profession Ordinance, right? Did you know that in the UK, that was also the case, but that happened a few years before that in 1919, right? It is the same for even such progressive nations such as the US. Why is that? That is because there is this inherent thinking that women are physically weaker, that we are emotional beings, that we are ultra sensitive, and these are all true. We are sensitive, we are empathetic beings, we are physically weaker. But does that automatically disqualify us of the opportunity and the right to practice law? By all means, no. But the thing is, because women have been excluded from the practice of law or anything related to law for centuries, so much that is related with the practice of law is described or viewed or perceived as male. So when anybody thinks of a lawyer, the first image that comes to your mind is a man, and not even a young man, an old man, perhaps pot-bellied, right, with a fancy watch, right, maybe with a receding hairline, right? And that is not that. I mean, I challenge you. You know, I'm sure I'm not far from the truth, but that is because because women have been excluded from the practice of law because of this incorrect perception that women are not able to deliver in law as well as men do, because somehow we are not capable of doing that. This is not just theory, this is also a fact. Okay, so I mean, I'm sure there is a very senior lady lawyer. All of you know who it is. When she was in the if I give out too much information, you'll be able to figure out who it is, so I won't. But there was a situation she told me about how her male counterpart was handling a particular case. And that male counterpart had to recuse himself from the case, and the case ended up with her. And the clients came to meet her, and the clients came and sat in front of her at her desk, and they looked at her and said, I'm going to speak in Sinhala, Miss Lawyer kiyata denne? And then she was like, Mama tamai lawyer. Miss dehenang me naduwa karanne? Like there was an utter look of shock on those clients' faces, because they just could not understand that this woman would be a good enough successor to their previous male lawyer. Okay, let me ask you this. Why is it that when you see these notices on notice boards in Halsdorf, right, advertising for vacancies in firms for instructing attorneys, it always says young female lawyer? Do you know? And this is data backed, right? A few years ago, when I had the privilege of serving in the Women Lawyers Committee of the Bar Association, we actually conducted a survey and we sent it out to the entire membership. Both men and women were able to respond, but we asked them what women consider to be some of the biggest challenges that they face and some negative experiences that they have had, right? Do you know that even during some of the younger lawyers during their apprenticeship, it is very publicly the speaker, and this is it's done very unconsciously. We don't even realize we're doing it. But the speaker very casually said, oh, you girls, now if you work really hard, you can do well and join a firm. Being a notary is a very difficult thing to do. So this is blah, blah, blah. This is what you need to do to be a good notary. And as an instructing attorney, these are the things that you have to prepare for. Now, that's all noble because you are helping these young ones. But why would you jump to the conclusion that if you are a girl apprentice doing the apprenticeship course at law college, that automatically counseling is not for you? Why? Have we asked ourselves that question? Have we asked ourselves as lawyers when we go into a courtroom, why more than 50% of those who pass out from law college are women, but that is not reflected in the courthouse? And I'm not talking about just juniors. What about female counsel in the forefront? I am told very often about how it's very sad that, we don't have women coming forward and becoming counsel, so on and so forth, right? But why is that? It is something that we have taken for granted. It is something that we have also internalized as women counsel. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I went to a district court outside of Colombo, and I was conducting a trial. But I walked in, this was quite a spacious courthouse, one of the nicer courthouses in the country. And I walked in, and the two bar tables in front, there was just one seat available. It was packed. Not a single woman at these bar tables, right? There was one seat there, but I instinctively went and sat at the back, where the juniors sit, or where the instructing attorneys sit. And I sat there, and it took me a few minutes, and I was like, wait, there's a vacant seat there. Why am I not going there? Because somehow I also had accepted that I am not, supposed to be there. That's not someplace I should be. Okay? So we need to break out of that kind of thinking. Another very, very scary thing that, that I have experienced and seen is the very, sometimes we don't even realize it's happening. but the way women are bullied in court, right? It's sometimes very innocent, but the snide comments that we have to endure in court by virtue of us being women. You know, if I don't want to go into too much detail and give you too many examples, but because it is also very uncomfortable for me to do that, right? I would like to be appreciated for my competence, not about whether I'm a woman or a man. And I'd like to be appreciated for doing my job, not in spite of being a woman. Because those are some of the comments that you do get. And I want to challenge the women on this in this session as well. How many times have you laughed when a female colleague has had to endure a snide comment or something related to her femininity in the canteen or in the courthouse when she is making submissions in court? Sometimes, you know, we don't even realize it. Everybody else is laughing, so we laugh along because, I mean, we don't want to be considered as difficult, no, right? But if we don't, you don't have to stand up and say, don't do that, that's not right, or whatever. Just don't laugh. Don't laugh. Sometimes these comments come not just from lawyers, it comes from even the judges. I must say, though, that over the years, I'm completing my 19th, and over the years, I can say it has got so much better. There is far greater acceptance of us in the legal profession. We have been recognized as a force to be reckoned with. And by the simple act of defiance of Women Council to keep coming to court and doing what they do, we have been able to send out the message that we are here to stay. And because women have been doing this over the years, slowly, with a great deal of hard work, now there is greater acceptance of women in the profession, right? How am I on time, Hasini?
You have now reached 15 minutes.
Okay.
You
So,
can wrap up.
yeah. So another very scary thing that we were able to unearth through this survey was that you wouldn't believe it, but women are the junior females are not paid the same way, not in all chambers, but in certain chambers. The male juniors are paid 1/3 the seniors fee, whereas the women are paid a salary, which is far less than what the male juniors have, right? Now, this is not something I'm making up. This is backed by data. Okay, these are what people have told us and have written and told us. There is, and because women find it difficult to find places in chambers. Now, this leads to another very sinister and very insidious element of this entire discussion, this discourse, is that because women have this sense of vulnerability and are in a position of vulnerability in the practice, there is an opportunity to take advantage of them. And most often this is done, sometimes, not most often, but quite often it happens sexually. And there is a great deal of that happening as well. Sometimes it is just understood and taken for granted. But once again, it's getting better. It's definitely getting better, but it is not something we can ignore and sweep under the carpet and pretend that it's not happening. It is happening, and it's time we actually recognize that and do something about it and tell ourselves that it's not okay. It needs to stop. Whilst other jurisdictions also face similar situations and similar challenges, those jurisdictions have taken positive steps towards addressing this. So my question is, why not us? Why not us in Sri Lanka in this jurisdiction? There's a lot more to say, but I'll stop there in the interest of time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jaiman. I think you very boldly pointed out some of the very obvious realities. And if a lot of the participants have seen or experienced it, I had so much to resonate with what you had to share. And something that I just wanted to bring in is that, as I have also seen notices in the notice boards in Halsdorf, trying to recruit male lawyers from Colombo with a car for very high functioning chambers. So there is also that element to it. And like you said, there have been multiple occasions where I myself has not been taken seriously for being a female as well as a junior, and not being considered as counsel, so to speak. So thank you for sharing that. I hope there will be questions and even things to reflect by the participants, because this webinar is for the purpose of starting this conversation out in the open, and providing a space for everyone who wants to recommend something, question something, even something that you want to clarify. Please maximize the use of the Q&A. And we will take your questions towards the end. So thanks, Mokshini, Ms. Jayamana. I will move to Ms. Rajapaksha now. So I have two questions for you. So my first question is, continuing from what Ms. Jayamana stated about some of the expectations from women as a whole and women in the legal profession. How do gender norms, how do gender roles, impact how women and people of all genders progress in the legal profession? Does it impact how they think about continuing their profession, staying out of the profession, reintegrating into the profession? And you are also a mother of a cute kid. So how have you, you can even, if you're comfortable, share your personal experiences. And even how does this play out in the way that chambers operate? Because we don't have things like maternity leave or regulations to, govern these things in the chamber practice, which is largely unregulated. So please share our insights on it, but please leave some time for my follow-up question on the policy which was recommended by Ms. Gomez at the start. Over to you.
Hasini, thank you very much for that question. I mean, I completely resonate with my colleagues, Ms. Gomez and Ms. Jaiman, and they have touched very well on this aspect of gender norms and societal norms that are really perpetuated by our everyday activities and thinking. Well, as you know, Hasini, even if you go watch TV now, it's always a woman who makes that cup of tea, who is there to ensure that 99% of the germs at home gets killed. So whether this woman is a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, a stay-at-home mom, it doesn't matter. Everything's on her. She's waiting until her kids come home in dirty clothes to wash them. So our societal norms and on what a woman should be doing at home has been the same. I always say this, how the technology on washing machines have changed over the years, but the task of picking up the clothes and putting into the washing machine is still with women. So therefore, we live in that society. That is our reality, whether you're a lawyer or not. That is a sort of reality you have to live with. I recall my experience when I was at the Attorney General's department as an apprentice. A colleague of mine was telling me that she's looking out for marriage proposals. I said, wait, why? Wait till you're a lawyer, because, you're a lawyer. You will have like better suitors coming your way. And she said, no way. After I become a lawyer, no one will want to marry me because I'm a lawyer. Now is the best chance for me to go marry. And that really got me thinking like, wow, okay. So again, now coming back to societal norms about women being lawyers. And because see, if a woman is, very friendly and she's pleasant, the quick thinking is, oh, she's up to no good. She's assertive, then she's seen as aggressive. She's like, okay, she's very high-headed, that very difficult to speak with her She doesn't talk with anyone. She's not a friendly sort of a woman. So, woman in our field, no matter what she does, how she dresses, how she carries herself, will always be judged. You know, and then if she performs well, there will always be something saying, oh, because she's related to so and so, or because she has these connections, that's why she's given these good cases. So, a woman is always judged in our profession. But like, how my other colleagues also mentioned, it's about what really do to distill these perceptions, and we really need to take this up with Sri Lanka Law College as a module, just to help people understand that now a role of a woman has been evolving, and now it has evolved to a greater extent, and therefore there's a need for us to facilitate that evolvement, because nothing really facilitates it. Because Ms. Gomez spoke about how a woman, a mother, a lawyer did not have a place to pump her breast milk. She did not have a lactation room. So we are talking about a courthouse that is there to ensure, that the laws, the equity, the justice is delivered. But however, that place cannot forego this one woman who is there to ensure that justice is delivered to the right set of people. Right? We cannot forego one person. So even if it's just one mother out of 1,000 or 2,000 female lawyers, we still cannot overlook that need. I recall there was a pumping room that was made some time ago at the High Court of Colombo. It was made out of a container box. I'm unsure whether it's still there. As you entered the High Court, it was their container box. And once, when I was not a mother, I just walked in to see like what it was for. And I was told, oh, that's a room for those who come to access justice, in case they come with their kids, and if they want to breastfeed them, they could use this facility. But you can't even breathe inside that, let alone like pump milk or feed your kid. Because of lack of ventilation, it was very difficult, especially when it's so heaty. It was very difficult. So those sensitivities have not been taken into consideration. Do we, you and I, do we have access to clean washrooms at court premises? Do we, you and I, do we have access to clean water? Let's talk about very basic things that we need. As much as we love to speak about legislative reform, where is our access to clean water? Where is our access to sanitation? Where is our access to mensuration? Anyone who is mensurating, does she have access to menstrual hygiene management, a place to buy a sanitary napkin so easily? And then you go into some of the female lawyers' washrooms, there's not even a place to hang your, put your handbag and keep your files. That is the level of that is the level of lack of sensitivity that we see in these basic structural facilities that are even already available to us. And because also we think, oh, women will get over it somehow, they will carry on with it somehow. And we see how women are also exposed to smoking. As a passive smoker, women, for women, women's health, there of course they're adversely affected. Their health risks are very high. They could be, their reproductive health could be affected. So our even health risk, even in the profession itself, could be very much different to that of our male counterparts. So societal norms, we have to grapple with the societal norms. We still have to take the brunt of the, household work. And you asked me, now I'm a mother, of a really cute kid. You said absolutely, but would I have done all of that being in practice? Definitely not. I would have not been able to do that. And that's a sad truth, because I would have not been able to keep up with the hours of work. And also, Hasini, Ms. Jaiman also mentioned, we have a maternity benefits ordinance, but it does not cover lawyers who are in practice, who are in the unofficial bar. Of course, if you're a lawyer attached to a state department, certainly you will be given maternity benefits. Or unless you're a lawyer attached to a sort of a firm, I'm certain you might be given maternity benefits, but not when you're in the unofficial bar. Who pays for you soon after your delivery? Who's going to pay for you for that 84 working days after the delivery? Nobody's going to pay for you. How are you going to take care of your child? And then who's going to really help you out, give you that flexible timing? Imagine, how would you even communicate to courts and say, I can't come to courts to make an application, my child is sick? That would not even be seen as an excuse. I'm sorry, I can't come to courts because I have, massive period pain, which prevents me from even standing up from my feet. There could be such escalated health issues that certain of women face, but they are not even seen as excuses. They are not even spoken of. Like if you have these issues, probably someone would be like, okay, so stay at home, this profession is not for you. Hasini, many a times in my life when I was practicing criminal law and fundamental rights law, I was told, by certain counsels, why don't you consider doing a job at a bank? And I said, why? And they said, because, then you can leave work at 4. I said, what for? I like what I do. I really like how I'm contributing for this kind of work. But because they thought women should be only doing, very limited sort of roles altogether, you should not be in practice because practice is a male dominated, sort of a field. And therefore, participation of women need not be really taken very seriously. So likewise, we have to really fight it out with the existing societal norms, the norms that people have already said, like Ms. Jaiman also said, women counsel are not taken seriously. Or like Ms. Gomez said, women have to work twice as hard as their male colleagues to really score some marks, to really get some pointers, or even to get paid. And sometimes they are really doing the heavy load. They are the ones making notes. And where does the gender stereotyping comes in? Every time when a consultation goes on, perhaps if you're a woman, you could be asked to take notes while other colleagues could be thinking while you're the one taking notes. And sometimes you'll be asked, hey, you're taking notes, right? And you'll be like, yes, of course I'm taking notes because, hey, that's perhaps what I was supposed to do. So these are like little things that has happened. And I also recall an incident that I had encountered. I was in the Supreme Court and I was in the presence of, let's say, 10, 15 President's Counsel because we were after a case. And this one President's Counsel who was about well over 70 years, in midst of this conversation about what we are going to do after the break, he suddenly said, oh, you have nice feet, in front of all these people. I did not know, Hasini, what to do. I was so ashamed of myself. I wanted to literally I wished I had this magical power to just disappear because it was so embarrassing. It was so embarrassing and derailing. I was just thinking, oh my God. I didn't even know how to even respond. But today, being in this profession, I know that comment in itself causing a sense of uncomfortableness to me could be considered as as a comment that borders on sexual harassment, because Ms. Gomez also spoke about the concept of world of work, C190 convention. They have given broad interpretations, spreading rumors, gossiping, and even causing certain sense of uncomfortableness to another person, commenting on their appearance, commenting on their family life, personal life choices, could tantamount to harassment altogether. So our sections, Penal Code section on 345, can be interpreted in a much more broader sense. But at that moment, because I was just starting up in my career, I did not know what to do. And in the same breath, I must say, once I was at a trial at bar and I was about to do a bail application, and I still recall President's Counsel Anil Silva standing up and giving me his seat and said, sit here, what are you doing? So I recall these moments because, different attitudes of different, male, female counsel altogether. And like Ms. Gomez said, we have to make sure that not just the female, even men are safe in this profession, that our safety is the number one priority that we must take into account. But of course, women are more vulnerable to this. So like everyone has been discussing, we don't just need a policy, we also need a good accountability mechanism. We also need an independent complaints commission. The complaint cannot go to the same perpetrator or to the best friends of the perpetrator or to the people whom the perpetrator could go to a big match with. So we need some independent panel who are diverse, who sort of represent all sectors. People should be able to complain anonymously. There should be bystanders who take this up, because we need to really build bystanders to say, hey, I'm sorry, that was really uncalled for. Even in that setting that I spoke of, I really wish someone said, I'm sorry, I don't think you should have made that comment. I don't think that was an appropriate comment to be making to my colleague here. I really wish somebody stepped up. you know. So bystander intervention is very much necessary, Hasini, because if bystanders don't come, if like Ms. Jayamana said, if we don't say, hey, come on, that is really uncalled for. I don't think that's the kind of joke you should be making, because it's unrelated to what we're discussing here. Somebody's personal life is irrelevant to us. So we need that bystander intervention. We also need policies against retaliation, Hasini. Otherwise, this one standalone anti-sexual harassment policy will not survive. And that is a guarantee I could give you, because we need all of these sort of systems has to be strengthened all around, so that when a complaint is made, it is time bound. There's a committee looking into it. There'll be a decision that will be made, and there'll be a policy against retaliation, so that no one can ever take any sort of decision against you. Because harassment is a persistent topic, and we have been seeing it. We've been witnessing it, at least to yourself or to a colleague, but hardly anything gets done, because also women are not represented in higher committees. How many women are there in the executive committee of the Bar Association? I mean, but women are the majority of the profession, isn't it? I mean, majority of the women are in the legal draftsman department. Women are there in the Attorney General's department, in the unofficial bar. But how many are really there in the executive committee? How many women have contested for the Bar Association presidency? Because women don't think that is for them. But whenever a subcommittee is made, we think that's our role. Whenever secretary position opens up, well, you might think that's your role. But we really need to also develop, like Ms. Jayamana said, take the front seat. Women are the majority. Contest. We will vote for you. And really speak about our issues, persistent issues that we have. So again, once again, the floor is open. I'm sorry if I took about 4 minutes extra, but just to explain it out to you about, we need a policy. At the same time, we need rigorous training, mandatory training, introductory trainings from law college itself. And then we need refreshers to help people understand, hey, these sort of words, these sort of conduct, you cannot do this. Their safety is number one, because Hasini, when a profession is not safe, you leave. Now, when I was at the World Health Organization, I'm very fortunate for the opportunity they gave me to be a part of the technical finalization of the patient safety charter. Now, you could see, therefore, how a different profession is taking the safety of patients and health service providers very seriously. Now, they have a charter for that. So similarly, why have we not taken into account the safety of our clients who come to us? Are they safe? In the event they are harassed, where could they go? And the event we are harassed by our clients, where do we go? In the event that we are harassed by our same set of colleagues that we work with, where do we go? What do we do? So all of these aspects have to be taken into account, Hasini. And our policy has to be, 360, take all of these things into account. And it cannot, like Ms. Gomez said, sit on a nice shelf, but should be a good policy with teeth, so that we feel comfortable and confident that in the event our safety is ever an issue, we will have some relief. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rajapaksha. Thank you so much for sharing even your personal experiences. So the moment that you had of embarrassment that you had to experience, so that was one, not to trivialize your experience, but there are maybe really more aggravated conditions and
Absolutely.
experiences that
This is all I
were
could share on this platform, Hasini. I could have spoken about some of the experience my own colleagues have encountered and endured and have shared with me, but certainly this is not the platform for me to even bring those up. But it happens. It's a reality, and none of you would be even surprised by it, because it's a given sometimes. These are things that I have been informed. These are things you have to get over with. You have to really arm up and suit up, and these are things that you will encounter as a woman, but I ideally think you shouldn't. So yes.
I certainly agree with you. And even I have had colleagues who had to drop off very early in the profession. And I have had a lot of people come up to me and say, you're very lucky, you have a good chamber, but it shouldn't depend on luck. And so let me come back to Ms. Gomez, because you had just opened up some recommendations. And as Ms. Rajapaksha is now, very comprehensively saying, is a policy on anti-discrimination, non-discrimination and anti-harassment, having zero tolerance for members of the bar. Is that a way forward for us? From an outside perspective, is it something that you would recommend as an expert, for the BASL to perhaps adopt? I know we are in principle trying to get it, and there have also been a charter on that previously done by the Women's Lawyers Committee of the BASL under the able leadership of Dr. Ramani Jayasundara. So is that something that the BASL should take up very seriously and try to adopt and implement, in a mainstream way, so that these experiences are not just, discussed in a hush-hush, but there is real accountability and no impunity. What are your recommendations on that?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, I think Naushala also touched on it. I mean, I think it is any institution, such as a bar association, should be having these kinds of policies in place. And it needs to be detailed. It cannot be just like a couple of lines, I think, there are many companies in the private sector as well who have, when you ask them for okay, do you have an anti-sexual harassment policy? They will say, yes, we have a few lines in our code of ethics or code of conduct. So you have that kind of sort of, what shall I say, piecemeal kind of approach to addressing these issues, but that is not enough. And I think it's extremely important, given the fact now the other panelists have mentioned that you have a majority of women lawyers, then how do you address this issue? And it's a reality, as you said. Both Hasini also mentioned it briefly, but Naushala also talked about the fact that sexual harassment or any kind of harassment, for that matter, is a reality, and there needs to be measures in house to be able to deal with it. So for me, coming from the outside again, it's not about saying, oh, this is really difficult and we can't be doing this. We don't have the funds to do it. Find the funds and do it. I think that for me is what it is. Find the funds, because the UN is helping. I know that the bar gets support from the UN. Put in an application, put in a proposal to the UN. Say we need to put up creche facilities for, little by little. It can be just a room, right? Not a container, hopefully, but a room, a small room, which, can accommodate women lawyers who are coming in there in small steps. Do it in small steps, but do it. I think these are the, and you need to have a comprehensive document that actually spells out all of these different issues. For example, I think, Naushala, you mentioned about menstruation, right? I mean, there are countries that allow for menstruation or period leave, right? This has been legalized in certain countries, right? So these are things that we could be looking at. And it's also about, you talked about maternity benefits, and you're quite right. The same lawyer that I spoke with, the young lady, the young woman lawyer who had just had a baby, she basically said, you're never accepted. If you don't go to work, you will be left aside, you'll be set aside. Somebody else will take over your case, right? That is how it is, right? But as I keep saying in many of these, in many of these spaces, nobody else can have a baby at the moment. It's only the women that can have a baby so far, right? If that is the case, then I think we should be supporting women, whether they be lawyers or anyone else for that matter, to have that baby and to be able to look after that baby. And additionally, like Mokshini said, like Naushala said, to be taken into consideration that we are human beings and we have the right to be equal, and we have the right to be heard in terms of our expertise, right? So these are things that we need to be doing. Okay, I would like to propose, I've been thinking about it. I don't know how workable it is, but, maybe to look at things like, even in the regional bars, to start propagating this idea that you should be having a room where mothers, young mothers or expected mothers can go and rest, etc. Right? Because these are basics for me. It's basics. And, so yeah, I just want to
Thank you, Ms.
also,
Gomez. Yeah,
one
sorry.
thing I mentioned briefly about wage disparities. These are things that can be in a gender policy, in a gender equality policy, that you can't be doing these things.
Yes.
You need true value. And I think if again, going back to the ILO and the standards, you
Yeah.
have standards in place which say equal remuneration for work of equal value. That's the catch. Equal value is the catch, right? You can call it what you like, but if the work is of equal value, you need to be paid the same.
Yeah.
So I think there and
There is a
lead-
question on, there's a question on, I can read it out if you can just tackle it very briefly, and then I will move on to the next two questions quickly. So the question is, we are working to ratify ILO C190 on gender-based violence and harassment in the world of work. So can we collaborate to ratify it in Sri Lanka? I'm with Yogi Solidarity Center. So I think this may be a question for the Bar Association. But certainly, I think Ms. Gomez, you will also agree that you can share your views on it very briefly, and then we will move on to the next two questions.
Yeah, so I mean the process to try to ratify C190 has been going on for many years now, and I think the more stakeholders that get involved in that process, the better, right? So you have trade unions pushing for it, right, and you have civil society pushing for it, right? There are others that there's pushback as well at the same time, right? Saying maybe not. Right. The point is that we need to be collaborating and try to find as many like-minded sort of entities that would be able to push this thing through. It's been a long process, and the point being for me, as I said, is not just ratifying it, but making sure it is being implemented. Sri Lanka has ratified many ILO conventions. I think over 40 conventions, and we have the highest number of ratifications in South Asia. Doesn't mean that we are implementing any of it. And I think it's also, I mean, I feel very strongly about this, the fact that maybe the Bar Association, the lawyers need to be coming in on this advocacy, on the advocacy that is involved in making sure that these things are being pushed through. So it's an important stakeholder. The bar is an important stakeholder. We must never forget that, right? Yeah, I hope that answers the
Thank you.
question.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez, for highlighting that. So the bar is an important stakeholder, certainly it is. I will move to the next two questions and take them together. And I hope, Ms. Jayamana, you can come in to respond to this to give perhaps a composite answer. So the first question is, what can I do if I'm sexually harassed by a senior lawyer? And secondly, is this gender equality problem only a problem for women practicing in Colombo? Do other women really have this problem? Sexual harassment, we understand everywhere. It is there, but must be addressed, but other aspects. Perhaps if you can give an answer to what you can gather from these questions.
Thanks a lot, Hasini. Not a very easy question to answer, but first and foremost, would you mind if I take the second question first?
Yes, please.
Because that's more. So actually, to tell you the truth, I'm wary of using the word discrimination, but let's face it, what we have discussed thus far has aspects of discrimination in it. I must say that in the research that we have done, women in outstation bars face less of this form of discrimination than those in the Colombo district. I don't know why that is, but I believe, even if you go to an outstation bar, Hasini, in your practice, you would notice that there are lots of women in the forefront who have vibrant practices, chamber practices, and these are women who have now reached the status of being a senior, right? So because of that, they have a chamber of their own, and they have juniors of their own as well. So being a woman, I feel like one of the reasons why this is not very prevalent in the outstation bars is because we see a lot of women who are coming forward from many years ago. This takes time, right? In order to reach the status of a senior with a vibrant, successful practice, you need to have put in the hard yards several years ago if you are to enjoy that success now. So I feel like the reason why more and more young people in the outstation bars are not facing this level of discrimination or this kind of stereotyping in the outstations is because we have had senior lady lawyers taking the bull by the horn and insisting on making their presence known in the bar, in the regional bars, right? That is one of the reasons why this has happened, as in why it is that more and more senior women lawyers are seen in the forefront of the practice in outstation bars. I don't have the research to give you an answer to that. But yes, it is not as prevalent in outstation bars as it is in the Colombo district. Sexual harassment, in that second question, or another part of that second question, I find to be very disturbing the fact that it is almost as if there's a given that sexual harassment takes place, right? It's like, yeah, sexual harassment, yeah, okay, sure, it does happen. I thank the person for that question. Thank you so much for posing that question. But I think the fact that you have identified the fact that sexual harassment is present, but distinguish that from the other forms of negative experiences women have in the bar is also quite telling. To answer the question posed, the first question, what do I do if I am being harassed by, or if I'm being sexually harassed by a senior? Honestly, to tell you the truth, your options are very limited, sad to say. That is the sad truth. And when I say options, I mean options that would guarantee you positive results. But having said that, you are not without allies, right? If there is a junior or anyone for that matter who is at present undergoing this kind of experience, the first thing I need to tell you is it is not okay. It is not supposed to be a given. It's not supposed to be normal, despite what anybody might tell you. You should not be treated like that. You are supposed to be valued for the work you do and for nothing else. So I would encourage you to find a female, first and foremost, a female ally whom you can confide in. And once that happens, thereafter, you and that female ally can then go to another woman in the profession who is a senior, who you can trust, and escalate it to that senior, a female. And thereafter, find a way of sitting down and discussing how best to navigate through that situation. Now, we don't have a grievance handling mechanism, although Hasini did mention that during the time of Dr. Ramani Jayasundara's leadership of the Women Lawyers Committee, with the guidance of even leaders in the corporate sector, such as Mrs. Dilani Alagaratnam, and there were members of the profession, such as even President's Counsel Farzana Jamil and several others. We were able to draft a grievance handling mechanism, which is not just to address issues of sexual harassment. It is a mechanism by which male or female, a member of the bar can report and submit an incident of grievance being subjected to a grievance by a fellow member of the bar. So needless to say, sexual harassment is one of the ways in which that such a grievance can be, you can be subjected to such a grievance. So Hasini, I think that we are long overdue on having such a mechanism, and I believe that mechanism, not I believe, I know for a fact that that has also been approved by the Park Council at the time. So I think I would strongly urge that, we do something about it and bring this up and ensure that it is passed and implemented and that it sees fruition, because it's not only going to benefit women, it's going to benefit every single member of the profession, whether male or female. Just want to say one more thing before, because I understand we'll be closing soon. Having said all of this, I believe that as women who want to be in the practice, we should also not consider ourselves to be victims all the time. Yes, there are lots of negatives, but we can't also ignore the fact that despite these negative experiences and challenges, other women have pushed forward and gone through. So don't give up, keep at it. And I would encourage our male colleagues to keep standing with us. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that the reason I have also been able to make it thus far is because I have had male colleagues who have supported me along the way, for which I'm extremely grateful, and male seniors as well. So let's not forget the important role that our male colleagues play in this as well. So I tip my hat to them for being sensitive to this issue and continuing to stand by women in the having recognized the prevalence of such incidents in our profession. Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Jaiman. We have two questions about the involvement of male lawyers and in advancing gender equality. I will take the first question first in the interest of time, because we are about 4 minutes away from wrapping up. And I will direct it to perhaps Ms. Rajapaksha. Is gender equality in the profession, and is gender equality or inequality in the profession an issue that should be the burden of women alone? If not, what is the role of men in creating a more inclusive legal profession? I will try to couple that with the other question. So there are the attendee is asking, given that gender is a social structure bigger than individual actors, in your experience, have you encountered male lawyers in the profession who may be sensitive to gender issues within the profession, but may still, without realizing, have views or acting ways which undermine gender equality within the profession? What would your response be to them? Very briefly, within a matter of 2 minutes, if you can just briefly address these questions, and then we'll try to wrap up.
Yes, yes to all, actually, because there is a bigger role that all of us can play, especially, anyone in the chamber. You could suggest that you work on a rotational basis, that there are flexible hours. You could also schedule some of the consultations with your clients in the afternoon, so that perhaps, women in the chambers can leave by at least by 8 p.m., again, ensuring their safety. So no need to sort of schedule those consultations late in the night, but those can be kept for those who are available and who could be at the chambers to have such consultations late in the night. So likewise, we could have certain practical approaches, also practical interventions can be done. You could also, Bar Association can do a spot audit, can do a spot or a rapid gender assessment, an anonymous one where women can actually make that survey and indicate to them whether they are paid well enough, or in comparison to their colleagues, are they underpaid? Is there a minimum wage that they should be paid? Is there a minimum wage that you should be paid for per hour per day? These are standards that Bar Association can also come up with, sort of minimum mandatory standards. If you're having a chamber, you need to have a safe access to a washroom, sanitary facilities, and then you also have to take into account in the event that you have a mother in the chamber. Do you have such facilities, especially when that mother goes out to the courthouses? Do you have a way of affording the facilities for them, or do we have other alternatives that we could provide for them? So likewise, Bar Association can certainly take the leadership in setting some minimum mandatory standards that everyone should adhere with. And also, we spoke about how best to respond, but let's also think about how to prevent these from happening.
Not to interrupt the flow of what you said.
Sorry.
Yeah, the question is about, do you think that men have a role to play?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the answer is a given.
Absolutely.
And it should not be the burden of women alone in, advancing gender equality in the legal profession.
Absolutely.
And I think the answer is that we need to keep at it with these conversations and, try to engage with opposition, with encouragement, allies as much as we can. If you
If I may
also,
also, Hassan, if I may
Yeah.
also, we need to ask ourselves this question, the pertinent question, why this policy has not seen the, has still not seen the daylight still. Like, what is really stopping this policy coming into practice? Because women have been in the field for really long. I mean, but these issues have been very persistent, but nothing really palpable has done. Now we can see even in the
yes,
comments,
there's a
someone has
question.
asked.
There's a question. Once a gender equality policy is in place, how do we ensure senior male lawyers take on the policy and ensure that juniors know about it and they can use it? So we need to keep at it, keep advocating.
And Bar Association really has to take the initiative in implementing it and also the accountability in the fact that it is rightfully implemented so that we don't only address surface level issues, but also these structural issues, especially when women consist of the majority of the profession. And if their safety is at risk, and if women are saying, as Ms. Jaimana said, if it is backed by data, and if women are saying it's unsafe, help us. Now we can see one of the attendees saying, I am being sexually harassed by a senior. What can I do? And if we don't have answers to that, I mean, where are we going from here? So we need mechanisms to respond as well as to prevent sexual harassment from occurring within the field. Because if it's happening within the field, if our house is not in order, how are we going to ensure that every other house is going to be in order, especially when affording or extending that service to our litigants? Thank you.
Exactly. And on that note, there's one last question. We have talked about so many ground realities. And even from the question and answer box, we see that things like harassment are taking place. There's acknowledgement. There's also awareness. But there's a question on why does the BASL need a gender equality committee? Like first thing that I would respond to say is that there is already a gender equality committee, which has been set up for the first time, better late than never. But any final thoughts that, just in one sentence, if all three panelists can say why this committee is there and what does this committee need to be doing? What is our role? What do you think our role is? Just to finally wrap up your thoughts. I think much has been discussed already. But just to address this last question, why does the BASL need a gender equality committee?
You go first.
Ms. Gomez, yes.
Okay, so I think this whole panel has been talking about why we need a gender equality committee. That is what has been, sort of talked about for the last 1.5 hours, is why we need a gender equality committee and basically the different aspects that need to be covered by the gender equality committee. I just want to also briefly touch on the question about why once a gender equality policy is in place, how do we ensure senior male lawyers take on the policy and ensure that judge juniors know about it? I think the point being that it's about institutionalizing these policies. It's not about, ad hoc sort of policies coming and going. It is making sure that this is institutionalized. It could be that it's at the time when you take the bar, when you enroll at the bar, for example. Or it could be when you do the law college final exam. There can be different ways in which you can institutionalize these issues so that it remains on the cards, it remains on the table, right? So that you're able to take it forward. Otherwise, it becomes like, oh, it's that person's responsibility. She's not taking it up, so we are not going to bother with it. It shouldn't be that. It should not be an individual process. It has to be institutionalized. That is my, whole thinking. So, and I just want to touch briefly, again, I also was very disturbed by that comment, which goes to show that there is sexual harassment taking place. You have to name it, you have to shame it, right, is important, and we need to acknowledge it. And the fact that there's always recourse. It's not that we have nothing. You can go to the police. The police is where you go. We have a criminal law which criminalizes your brain. I think, it'll be getting allies, helping you, to support you to go to the police. But you can go to the police, right? And that is what I would say. Right, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Gomez. I think on that note, if that's okay, if there's anything else we can perhaps take this conversation forward in another webinar. I think there's much more to discuss. We can wrap up at this point. So thank you very much to all the panelists. We are taking small steps and we're putting things out in the open to discuss and think about with an open mind about what role we can play. Is there a way that we can contribute to the discussion? Is there a way that we can contribute to taking action and implementing some of the things that have been in the pipeline for a long time? So I think this was a good 2 hours, 1.5 hours spent in your evening. Thank you very much for all the attendees who have joined. And I hand the proceedings back to Ms. Poojani Galapathy to conclude.
Thank you, Hasini. Thank you very much for our panelists for that very thought-provoking discussion. And thank you very much for our interpreters who provided their services for this session today. It was extremely helpful to have your service. Thank you. And I would also like to reiterate that we are utterly grateful to the Bar Association of Sri Lanka for giving us this opportunity to actually share our experiences, thoughts, and build a dialogue on gender equality in the legal profession. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for all the participants who engaged in this discussion and everybody who put forward their questions. Thank you for participating and have a good evening, everyone.